Hello and welcome back to the Nmap tutorial. This is video 3B. We'll be going over the different scans that you can do with Nmap. Some notes, we're just going to be continuing. We're not going to do recap like we did in the last video, just because these two are just directly related. And in this video, we're not going to be using Kali. We're just going to be going over the concepts and ideas behind the scans. We'll show some of them in actual practice later in the course when we do an actual scan of our Metasploitable container, but a Metasploitable virtual machine. But for right now, we're going to be looking just at the scans, how they kind of work, what each one of them does, and how to enable them. So first scan that we're going to look at is the TCP Connect scan. How this works is actually pretty standard for how your computer typically creates a TCP session with another computer or device or server or whatever. How it works is it sends an initial SYN packet, gets a SYN ACK packet from whoever you're trying to connect with. You send an ACK packet, and then you continue your transmission with them, sending, receiving a web page or sending files to be uploaded or transfer between an FTP server and your computer. So there are a lot of different, basically anything with a TCP or a transmission control protocol connection. This is how every session starts. SYN ACK back, and then an ACK packet. For a TCP Connect scan, does the same thing. SYN ACK, and then as soon as it can establish a connection, it responds back with a reset. If it can accomplish all these goals, then it can decide that the port is open on the target computer. If it sends a SYN packet to the target and receives a reset, that means that the target port is closed. So what Nmap does is it does this for not every port on your target, but it does this for, I think the default is the first 1,000 and a couple of important ones. We can take a look at that in a little bit in the next video. So, but it will do this for set amounts predefined by Nmap, and it'll do popular ones. So, and then it will be closed if it sends a SYN and it receives a reset. Many of the ports on most machines are closed. And something that I want to point out is that this communication can take anywhere from 4 to 5 pings depending on the target and how it responds back with the SYN ACK and the ACKs. So it's typically 4 to 5 packets are being sent here. And if it's a closed case, you only have 2 packets being sent. So it's a 2 minimum, 4 maximum for number of packets being sent over the network. The reason why that's important is some of our other scans require less, and we'll go over them and I'll point them out. But before we move on, I also want to mention that the TCP Connect scan is the default scan for any scans you do that are not with root privileges, and it's one of the only scans that you can do if you don't have root privileges on the computer that you are sending from that has the Nmap. So when I say in the beginning of my tutorials and we're using Nmap, I like to use as root, it's because it allows me to do a lot of the other scans that we'll see later. The other thing to note with the TCP Connect scan is that the TCP Connect scan will leave record on your target that it established a connection with you on that port. It'll have like your MAC, your IP address, all that kind of stuff in the actual connection to your device. What does this mean? Well, this basically just means that um, if someone were to go into the forensic logs and look at that part of it, they would actually see the connections being established and created. That's one of the reasons why TCP Connect isn't really the scan of choice by most security professionals, unless you really don't care if the target has a record of you scanning them. Um, for instance, let's say you just need to know what ports are open on a computer, and you know where the computer is, and you know what it is, and you don't need to know anything more than that. Um, TCP Connect Scan just works great. It's reliable, does everything you need to. If you're in a pen test situation and you don't want a target knowing that you've tested that computer, or you don't want any logs being recorded on it, it's not really the best choice. So we're going to continue on to SynScan. SynScan is very similar to TCP Connect Scan. It's also called the half-open scan. The reason for this is that your Nmap will send a SYN packet, like in the TCP Connect scan, and it'll get a response back of a SYN ACK down here. And then your Nmap will automatically just send a reset instead of the appropriate ACK packet. So why does this happen? What is important about this? Well, the main important thing about this is that one, it doesn't leave a trace. You don't fully create the connection. Doesn't mean that you don't leave any trace on the target. It just means that it's a little bit harder for someone to dig into the records and find that kind of information. The other thing is that the SYN packet, the SYN scan, is smaller. So if you remember, I said this has a maximum of 5, minimum of 2 sends. This only has a maximum of 3, minimum of 2. So there's less packets going onto the network, and which makes you quieter overall. It's another reason why this is called a stealth scan, although this isn't really a true stealth scan. We'll get into stealth scans in a minute. But some people do call it that, so if you see someone say half open, stealth scan, SYN scan, all refers, the stealth scan might refer to other things, but they're referring to one scan. Stealth scan is typically a SYN scan. Stealth scans are typically, though, category, and we'll get into that in a minute. The option for enabling a stealth or a SYN scan here is the -s big S. If you don't do a little s big S, it doesn't work. The other thing to note is that the SYN scan is the default scan for root access. So if you bring up Nmap as root, this is the scan that it uses. But again, it has a 3 to 2 packets on 3 to 2 packets on the network, and it doesn't leave as many records on your target system as the TCP Connect scan. It's usually the default scan of choice. A lot of people use it. It's very reliable, even though it's not quite as reliable as the TCP Connect scan. It is still pretty reliable. And it'll distinguish between open, closed, and it'll also do filtered ports, but we'll get into that in a minute.